I'm just going to tell you what's happening out in the open in the media, which is a good place to start. Just start where it's being reported and what's happening, and at least understand that before you try to figure out whether the whole thing is being, I don't know, orchestrated by a reptilian civilization living under the Atlantic Ocean. So with that, we're going to be doing a whole lot of screen sharing, which I hope works. Okay. Now, everything that's been happening for the last 4 years, and there's been a lot happening, I can assure you, has pretty much been leading up to what I'm about to discuss with you right now. This is the latest development of note. We're then going to go backwards and look back, but initially we're going to start up with the latest development, but it's quite revealing. All right. What this is a press release from the office of Senator Marco Rubio. I get it. Reduce that. Let me put that down. Put this over here. It came out on December the 9th, my birthday. It was a nice present. I got a birthday present. I usually don't get birthday presents. I usually don't celebrate birthdays because, well, it's obvious why I don't do that. So I'm going to go through this and parse it for you. And let's see what we can learn. I assure you, there's never been a press release like this ever before. And it's very telling. Rubio, Gillibrand, Gallego applaud inclusion of unidentified aerial phenomena amendment in the National Defense Bill, which just passed. U.S. Senators Marco Rubio, Republican Florida, and Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat New York, along with Congressman Ruben Gallego, Democrat Arizona, applauded the inclusion of their unidentified aerial phenomena UAP amendment in the fiscal year 2022 National Defense Authorization Act. The first thing you need to know about that sentence is that Senator Marco Rubio ran for president, and he intends to run again. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand ran for president, and she intends to run again. And so now 2 presidential candidates, past and perhaps future, have jointly sponsored what amounts to a bill setting up structure for the UAP issue. There's a couple of other presidential candidates that stepped into this issue. Jimmy Carter, as a candidate, did it in 1976. And in a very big way, Secretary Hillary Clinton did it in 2015 and 16. I mean, she really did it. Hundreds of articles were written, all right, but they didn't generate a press release like this. And so the very fact that people who would like to become president of the United States are leading and sponsoring a bill like this is unprecedented. It's profound. And it's another reason why we're winning. Let's continue. UAPs pose a significant challenge to our national security. Well, technically, they do pose that challenge, theoretically. Appearing in sensitive U.S. airspace and around military personnel. The amendment would establish an office that would replace the current Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, which, by the way, had been parked over as a placeholder at the Office of Naval Intelligence. Appearing in sensitive Air Task Force, and would have access to the Department of Defense and intelligence community data related to UAPs. In other words, pretty much across the entire government. By doing so, the office will have the authority to establish a coordinated effort to report and respond to UAPs. Significantly improve data sharing between agencies on UAP sightings, address national security concerns, and report health effects people may experience in relation to UAP events. Interesting. The office will be administered jointly between the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence. I seem to think those are pretty high-level people. And will empower military and civilian personnel working for the DoD and intelligence community to report incidents and information about UAPs. Now, one thing you should notice about this paragraph that you may not have, and it's not trivial. UFO is not used. It's not used anywhere here. The term UAP is used, and that is highly significant. Why? I'm kind of beating a dead horse here. I've been talking about this for years and years.
Thank you.
But we needed to switch from UFO to UAP for a very important reason. UFO was the branding term created, supported, and encouraged by the United States government to create the intellectual ghetto of ufology. Meaning that after they had heaped enough shame and ridicule and laughter and giggles and smirks toward that term, that wonderful acronym, over many years, the moment that acronym came out of your mouth, you were labeled and people had the license to laugh. Now, you probably know of other situations like this in our society and other societies, both now and in the past. It's a very standard procedure. And it's very, very effective. And so every time we use UFO, we're basically saying, I'm from the ghetto of ufology. Okay. Hi. Can you talk to me? Give me some time. It had to go. It wasn't easy. But finally, the transition is underway. Helped a little bit. Maybe the turning point was when Hillary Clinton went on at the talk show with what's his face and said, there's a new term now. It's UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, here's another reason why it's important. If you want to get journalists to engage the issue, write about the issue. If you want politicians to engage the issue, write about the issue, or put out a press release, you need a term that isn't UFO, because the moment that turns up in their presentation or their press release or anything else, they've just said, hey, I'm Senator so-and-so from the ghetto of ufology. Not going to work. We provided them a new term. It's now got reasonable traction. And so now they can speak to this issue and say UAP. UAP does not have the baggage. It doesn't have the history of the ridicule. It is not a child of the truth embargo. And so it's really important. Language is important. I say this over and over again. If you want to change policy, if you want to be an activist, you have to use the right language. Bad language means failure. I can give you examples of very bad language in activism, both now and in the past, but I don't want to throw shade on other movements and activists. Let's just say that there are plenty of examples. Now, let's move on. Rubio and Gillibrand were joined by Senators Lindsey Graham, Republican, South Carolina, Senator Martin Heinrich, Democrat, New Mexico. And please note that, New Mexico. And Roy Blunt, Republican, Missouri, pretty conservative state. And so now we've got 5 senators, of at least 2, maybe 3, are on the Senate Intel Committee, maybe all 5, I'm not sure. And then 1 wonderful Democrat from the House. Basically, they're acknowledging them as part of this bill. Does this sound nonpartisan or bipartisan to you? Does this sound like a lot of people are climbing on that disclosure train, given the opportunity? Looks like it to me. Rubio is the vice chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And now I'll read some of his quotes. Again, remember, this is a man who plans on running for president. It is my hope that the creation of a new Joint Defense Department and Intelligence Community Office, again, they love the language, they love to stretch it, that's good, it just shows that it's important, focused on UAPs will provide the resources, analytics, and attention needed to determine what is loitering around our military training ranges. I like that term, loitering. The DoD and the IC need to ensure a more uniform collection strategy is in place and that we continue to destigmatize reporting of UAPs. Please note that phrase, destigmatize reporting on UAPs. That clearly implies that in the past it was stigmatized, which of course leads to the obvious question, Senator Rubio, who was doing the stigmatization? Continuing, particularly from military aviators, meaning reports being stigmatized from aviators, which was true in the past. Significantly, we also maintain the transparency and accountability that my provision in last year's Intelligence Authorization Act, he was definitely going to remind us of that, report provided by ensuring ongoing classified reporting. Senator Marco Rubio owns this issue at this point, though others are starting to climb on board. I'm suggesting to you that Senator Marco Rubio has calculated that getting on board this issue and leading may put him in the White House. Do you recall anything like that prior to this year, going back to 1947? Our national security efforts rely on aerial supremacy. Okay, not thrilled about that phrase, all right, because we're never going to have aerial supremacy regarding the ETs, but I get it. And these phenomena present a challenge to our dominance over the air. This is classic American speak, classic, world superpower speak. I get it. It appeals to a certain group within the political class. Staying ahead of UAP sightings is critical to keeping our strategic edge and keeping our nation safe. Okay, he's establishing further the national security basis on which to proceed. Gillibrand said, my amendment will establish a formal office to report and respond to UAPs and give us the scientific capabilities needed to track and share data, investigate sightings, and develop a response to this growing security threat. The United States needs a coordinated effort to take control and understand whether these air phenomena belong to a foreign government or something else altogether. Note that phrase, okay? Very important. I am proud to have worked alongside Congressman Gallego, a fellow Democrat, to include this amendment that will help remove the stigma surrounding UAPs, protect our nation, and keep those who serve safe. If you understand how bills are made, a bill is in the House, a bill is in the Senate, and then there's a reconciliation of those bills. Gillibrand put the language into the Senate bill. Gallego put the language into the House bill. That was eventually reconciled, and the final bill was passed. So in a sense, they're all part of creating the bill. At this point, Gallego is only the only person in the House that has been directly involved in creating language for legislation. Continuing, protecting our national security interests means knowing who and what are flying in U.S. airspace. Apparently, they don't know. Right now, our system of tracking and identifying UAPs. Point of order here, I'm doing what I can in this regard. I'm using social media. I may take sterner measures, but I would like to point out that unidentified aerial phenomena is already plural. It does not need an S, okay? It's not unidentified aerial phenomena. And so the S is going to have to go. And that's because we want to be crisp, we want to be clean, we want to be professional here. And so I'm going to do what I can to get rid of that S, I promise you. Is scattered throughout the Department of Defense and other departments and agencies of federal government. I actually was tipped off early that a full working group is going to be set up at the DoD. Based on briefings I've received as chairman of the House Intelligence and Special Operations Subcommittee. Okay, so you've got Gillibrand, who's a chairman of a subcommittee. You've got Rubio, who was the former chairman of the Intel Committee, now ranking member or co-chair, as they like to say. In other words, we got the creme de la creme here supporting this legislation. I'm excited that the amendment I introduced alongside Senator Gillibrand, oh, wait a minute, oh, this is Gallego talking, was included in the final version. As established in the NDAA, the UAP office would be given the task of providing a full spectrum of intelligence, scientific, and technical assessments relating to UAP. And it lists the various number of things that I think some of you have already seen. So there you go. All of this is about to happen. It's been called for. Now, I want to point out something that cannot be overstated or stated too often. All of this is creating a public-facing infrastructure for dealing with the UAP issue, which we should have had long ago, right? At this level, with this much support, but of course, we didn't. Why do I say public-facing? Because you see, there is a private, secure-facing structure bigger than this, which has been operating for 74 years. Obviously, in the early days, it was being formed, but eventually it was fully formed, or the cake was fully baked. That's been going on for 7 decades. So the obvious question is, if we already have a full infrastructure dealing with this issue, investigating this issue, recording and studying this issue, including bodies, including technology, yada, 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 why don't they just pull that up and say, wow, here's the structure, we've already had it, it's all set to go? Because that would end the truth embargo. And that is not the DoD's job. It is the president's job to do that. And so they have to create this public-facing structure, not only to show that they're cooperating, that they're doing the right thing and to garner public support and appreciation, but to cover their ass, because eventually it's going to be clear to everyone, oh yeah, they've been doing it all this time. And that was basically not a ruse, but a process, a maneuver to accomplish certain things it needed to be accomplished. I get that. Or to put it another way, all of this that you're seeing and reading, everything you're going to see today, is essentially part of I can never find just the right word. It's not a play. It is a orchestrated endeavor, which I have ultimately come to call a public relations-driven extrication project. Now, what the hell do I mean by that? Let me tell you something that you probably don't know. In the mid-1990s, the Department of Defense provided several millions of dollars to the best known, most powerful public relations firm in Washington, D.C., Hill and Knowlton, to do an extensive analysis and game playing of how the Department of Defense, or how the government in general, would go about presenting the truth about this issue to the American people. What to do if that truth was presented from some other direction, like another country, how to deal with the ultimate announcement itself, and how to deal with the implications and what would follow a disclosure event. That report was delivered to the Department of Defense a few years later, which is to say that they've been sitting on it for 20 years. And it looks as if they're now getting a chance to use some of that report. If any of you are shocked by this, don't be. If you think that the United States government hasn't been preparing for Disclosure Day for many decades, well, you're just underestimating our government. It's filled with very smart people, committed to our country and our national security. They have really good computers, the finest of supercomputers in the world, which are made in China, but they've got them, okay? And so they can do a lot of things that I can't do. In fact, nobody in this field can do, you can't do. And that includes game playing complex scenarios years, if not decades in advance. They are not being caught off guard here. They may have been slightly caught off guard by the launch of the TTSA, and that's another story. Okay, so that is the most recent event. It is profoundly significant. Now let's go back and look at some of the things that led up to it. And I'm going to take you back now to, move this over, June 17th, 2020. And this is, in 2021, the Intelligence Authorization Act, in which Marco Rubio made his move and put in the various language. Let me see if I can get the section up right away. There it is. It was in the comment section, not within the enumerated sections, which gave it a slightly different tact, I guess you could say. It wasn't kind of a legal demand, but it was a, how would you say, a strong request. And it was under advanced aerial threats. And as you can see, the word unidentified was in there quite a bit. I do not believe UFO is in there at all. And just quickly, the committee supports the efforts of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. Again, this was the place setting that they put over at the ONI. It's off to the side. I don't think it had maybe one person in the office, maybe a couple of desks and an iPhone. But it was a placeholder, something to point to, and that's what he's doing. He's pointing to it. As you know, we now have shifted that where it had to be, which is in the Department of Defense. To standardize collection reporting of aerial phenomena, any links they have to adversarial foreign governments and the threat they pose to U.S. military assets and installations. However, the committee remains concerned that there is no unified, comprehensive process within the federal government. Of course there is, but they can't say that. And by the way, do you think Marco Rubio knows there's an ET presence? 99.9% certain. Put your money down on that. Take whatever odds you can get. Aerial phenomena, despite the potential threat. The committee understands that the relevant intelligence may be sensitive. Nevertheless, the committee finds that the information sharing and coordination across the intelligence community has been inconsistent, and so forth. And he goes on down a ways talking about this and that. But the most important thing that is in this language, in this particular bill, which was made known in July of 2021, meaning it's going back to the beginning here, the Department of Defense, June rather, knew as early as June of 2020 that the chairman of the Intel Committee was requesting a report to come back from the government, not meaning the Department of Defense. And they were given 180 days from the signing of the bill, very generous. The bill didn't get signed until December, so the deadline was actually June 25. In other words, a year from the point at which the Department of Defense knew what they were going to have to do. So plenty of time to decide how to handle this, okay? But there was a political brilliance to this maneuver by Rubio. He might have remained the chair of the Intel Committee. I'm sure he would have liked that. But even if he wasn't going to be the chair of the committee, meaning there was going to be an administration change, or rather a change in the Senate, he put the report into the next administration. He put it all the way in to 2021, all right? So that the political election was over, things were settling down, and it could be addressed. But he did something else that was genius. First of all, he requested a public report, which is unusual, not really appropriate, and a classified report. Why isn't it appropriate? The Department of Defense does not want to issue public reports on UAPs or anything related to them, or ETs or anything else. It's all classified. It's not their business. It's the business of the executive branch and possibly the congressional branch in terms of hearings to do that, but no, they don't want to issue. They issue classified reports to the Congress, and the Congress decides what we should know. But he said, no, we want a public report. Okay. And guess what? If you want to get a lot of press coverage, put a date when the Department of Defense has got to provide information about the UAPs to the American people. That'll get their attention. As a result, hundreds of articles were written from then all the way up to the reports being issued in June 25th of 2021. And a lot of it mentioned Marco Rubio. A lot of attention, a lot of press coverage. Brilliant. But as you know, the June 25 report was 7 pages of acronyms and military speak. It had some interesting points in it, but it wasn't a big deal. Everybody was disappointed because not everybody understands how the government works. The report that mattered was the classified report, and that was presented to the four most important relevant committees in March 16th, I believe, of 2021, 3 months before the public report came out. And it was classified. And there has not been a known leak. There is one possible leak that might have gone to Richard Dolan. Otherwise, they've said nothing about it. They have been sitting now on that classified report, plus the briefing and slideshows and whatever else they saw, since March of 2021. 8 months. So they've had plenty of time to think about that, consider it, and decide what to do. So Rubio made his mark there, and he will be known for that, and he will get credit for that. Now let's move on a little forward. So Rubio puts out the language on this. Actually, it gets printed up, but I think the language was already in play and people knew about it. And then something else started developing, and I bring your attention to this because, again, it's unprecedented, is the Pentagon Press Secretary, John F. Kirby, former Admiral Kirby, who once commanded the USS Forrestal nuclear aircraft carrier, meaning hardcore military, who is now press secretary for the Pentagon, which sometimes uses journalists with journalist background, but in this case, a hard-nosed Navy admiral. Let me tell you, when it comes to aircraft carrier commanders and Navy admirals, you don't even want to cough in their direction. You just want to stand stiff and salute and hope they will leave you alone. These are tough guys, but he has a different job now. And the questions started coming in. Let's watch some. This is July 4th. At least it was put up. No, this is June 1st, right around the time that the language is going in the bill that Rubio is presenting on the 2021 NDAA. And you need to watch all of these carefully and watch his demeanor, right? Again, this is the first time I believe he was asked anything about this issue as press secretary for the Pentagon.
Coming as soon as this week or maybe even tomorrow. Can you say anything about what reporting that this could be coming as soon as this week or maybe even tomorrow? Can you say anything about what timing we should actually expect?
The what report, Matt?
Sorry, the UAP report, UFO report.
Notice the smile.
That is really for the DNI to speak to, Matt. As you know, this is a report, a congressionally mandated report. DNI is in the lead. It will be DNI who will be making that report. Obviously, DoD has a role in helping flesh out the information that will be in that report. But as for specific timing, I'd refer you to the DNI.
I hesitate to be asking this, but on the unmanned aerial phenomenon report, because many of these reported sightings have been from military personnel, and because you said that DoD is assisting with this effort, can you tell us anything about what you have been able to rule out? Have you been able to rule out a science fiction scenario of any kind of life form? Is this mechanical phenomena? Is this perhaps atmospheric? Can you just say, for people who are interested, that you have ruled out there's any life forms out there?
I would be getting ahead of a report that hasn't been submitted to Congress yet, and that's never a good idea for a spokesman in this town. So I don't want to get ahead of the report. And I refer you to DNI to speak to that.
You can rule out at this point.
I am not going to get ahead of a report that this agency is not writing in response to a congressional mandate. That would refer you to DNI for more detail about that.
Contributions to the UFO report. I've been speaking with a series of experts abroad who have expressed some concern about similar investigations in other countries having too much of a military focus and not enough input from civilian scientists. I wonder if that's a concern that the Pentagon has shared and whether that came up at all during this most recent review process.
We're participating in a DNI-led study, again, mandated by Congress. We're providing context and information that we have on these phenomena, and our focus is on supporting the DNI's efforts to produce this report. That's where our focus is, and again, that's our lane. That's our place to be in, is to provide the kind of context that we have, the information that we have to help the DNI produce this report for Congress.
What you're seeing is, well, first of all, imagine a former Navy admiral, then press secretary of the Pentagon, getting asked those questions in 1995. Just try to imagine it. What you're seeing is a man who almost certainly knows there's an extraterrestrial presence, but he also knows what's going on, and he is doing his best to answer these questions. It's not easy, right? Not easy at all. Handle it pretty well. Started off with some smiles and smirks, but you'll see shortly those completely disappear. But that is unprecedented just in and of itself. But guess what? Doesn't stop there. Let's move ahead to June, I think about 2 days later. And there's another press conference in which he is addressing this issue.
Okay. Okay, Matt Saylor, ABC.
Hi, John. Thanks for doing this.
Yes, sir.
A quick question on the coming UAP report. There's been some reporting that this could be coming as soon as this week or maybe even tomorrow. Can you say anything about what timing we should actually expect?
The what report, Matt?
Ooh.
Sorry, the UAP report, UFO report.
That is really for the DNI to speak to, Matt. As you know, this is a report, a congressionally mandated report. DNI.
Duplicate, sorry. Next one. This is June 8th.
Hey, John, happy birthday. There's no way that I can like sugarcoat this. I was talking to a gentleman about the UAP report, and he contends the Pentagon has alien bodies and crafts. So I just wanted to run this past you. Does DoD have these things, and if so, where?
Jeff, the UAP task force is really designed to take a look at these unexplained aerial phenomena, try to help us get a better understanding of them. Again, I'm not going to get ahead of the report that the DNI will submit, that we are helping, obviously, and providing input to, and I think I'll just leave it at that, Jeff. Louis?
John, can you specifically address the reporting that's come out about this UAP report? The reporting that these UAPs don't appear to be alien spacecraft, that there's not enough information to actually address what exactly they are, and that they're not a U.S. secret black program.
Yeah, look, I've seen the press reporting on this, Louis, but I'm not going to comment one way or the other about the reporting, or certainly about the work of the task force and the coming report by the Director of National Intelligence. I won't get ahead of that process.
So can you rule out specifically that these are not alien spacecraft?
I think I've answered your question. I'm not going to get ahead of a report that hasn't been filed to Congress, and I'm certainly not going to speak about intelligence issues here from the podium. Again, seen the press reporting, but I'm not going to be able to comment beyond.
You may note here that by putting a date on that report, which is what Rubio did, he provided cover for the Department of Defense for months, because they could always say, look, until the report comes out, we don't want to get ahead of it, and so forth and so forth. Brilliant, right? Gave them time to make their plans and so forth and be able to deflect questions like that. But you didn't see any giggles, you didn't see any laughs or smirks. He was asked about alien bodies. This is the journalists in Washington doing their job. Given the opportunity, they will do their job. But the truth embargo was extremely effective. One more. This is, I think, in July now, about another 30 days later. His demeanor gets increasingly serious. And again, but he still has to struggle with these answers.
I've very often been briefed on this report that's required by Congress. And also, just more broadly, does Secretary Austin see this, what apparently is an increasing number of reported incidents, as a safety report for the military in terms of pilot training and so forth, as well as a national security threat?
He has received a briefing on the work that the task force has thus far conducted. The report is,
he just confirmed that the Secretary of Defense received a briefing on the task force.
Is being crafted and will be delivered by the Director of National Intelligence, but he has received a briefing on the work thus far. And as we've said before, we take all incursions into our operating spaces seriously. So, I mean, like everybody else here at the Defense Department, certainly we are taking the entire matter seriously, as it regarding the potential for safety concerns.
In other words, regardless of what the explanation may be, or if there is none of what they are, there are incidents in which pilots are seeing things that are close enough that it could be a safety, or it is a safety problem.
It could potentially involve safety and or national security concerns. Absolutely.
Hey, John, happy birthday. There's no way that I can like.
Okay, let's move on. All right, let me get this out of there. Thank you. So now, what do we got here? Finally, on June 25, the Intelligence Assessment Public Report is issued. All right. And it's issued from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. And I think most of you are familiar with it. The most important thing in this report was the fact that they stated clearly that the technology that was being observed is not something the United States had. Again, this is a way of saying things without directly saying them. Now, a lot of people would have said fine, but a lot of other people, including me and many of you, would have known that the statement that this technology is something the United States doesn't have is virtually the same thing as saying this technology is not of human origin. Because the only other explanation is that this technology is from a Chinese military or a Russian military. We'll rule out most of South America here, and that is an even bigger problem for the Department of Defense. I assure you, if they had a choice between is this extraterrestrial Chinese or Russian, they would say, I hope to God that it is extraterrestrial. So again, the games are being played, the wordplay is going on, but it's all part of a larger and more important endeavor. So now we get up to, let me see if I can get this where it'll be readable. Okay. We move on up to, where is this? We're up to August 10, 2021. And this is the Senate bill, all right? And this had the final bill had the language in it. And wait a minute, I'm sorry. This is the Senate bill for 2022. Now we've moved ahead almost a year, and this is the second one that has the Gillibrand language in it. Hang on. Section 345, support for and oversight of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. Now, she mentions the appropriate committees of Congress, right? Meaning these are the appropriate committees that this is relating to. And guess what? They are the intelligence committees and the 2 armed services committees, 4. Those are the committees that received the March 16th classified report requested by Rubio. And the members of these committees were the principal focus of Christopher Mellon when he was going up on the Hill to, quote, brief members of Congress. I believe that in some cases he briefed them in more than one, like group of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. How many? Could be anywhere from 20 to 40. He often took witnesses with him. In other words, the Congress has been briefed. I mean, these key committee chairs and members have been briefed going back 2.5 years. And then they got the classified report. So the point I'm making here is I can assure you that these 4 committees and the members are briefed. They kind of know what's coming. They had plenty of time to think about it. It's not going to take them much time to make a decision on how to proceed. And then she goes on, she defines this and that and whatever she wants. But then she does something interesting here. She says, not later than 90 days after the date of the enactment of this act. Remember what Rubio did, 180 days? Now, in this case, she knew the bill was probably going to be signed pretty quickly, which was the case. And it was only 90 days, all right? So that puts the deadline, in this case, into 2022, maybe March. Okay. The Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, or such other entity as the Deputy Secretary of Defense may designate, remember that, to be responsible for matters relating to UAP, shall submit to the appropriate committees of Congress quarterly reports on the findings of the United Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force or such other designated entity. And she makes other requests in terms of setting up structure and what have you. Very good. And that, of course, was the beginning of Gillibrand's contribution here. It's not the final bill, but it was the initial language. Meanwhile, all right, over in the House side, Gallego, right, is creating language for the Senate bill, or the House bill, rather. Let me go there. Okay. Right. So this is the section put into the House bill, section 143. That's not it. One moment. Go a little further. Okay. Reports on exercise. No, that's not it either. I've got to go further down. Unidentified is all over this thing, but it's not just in our section. Okay. Okay. It's all the way down. That's not it, boy. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, God, that's no good. Forget it. I'll do this. These are big bills. Okay. All right. All right, look. The point is that Gallego had similar language in the House bill that was eventually reconciled. Now, this is where things get interesting. On November the 23rd, this is recent now, the DoD issued its press release. Remember, we have the recent press release from the office of Senator Rubio. Now we have a press release directly from the DoD. And what do they do here? Well, this is fun. Essentially, they announce the establishment of the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. I'm thinking that they gave it a name like that, so there was no way that anybody could come up with some snappy little acronym for it or some name, and also to make it sound heavy, which it is, I'll be honest with you. And they announced this thing being created. Now, this is November 23. Let's parse some of this. Today, Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks, high-level person, in close collaboration with the Director of National Intelligence, directed the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security to establish within the office of the USD-INS, that's the United States Defense Intelligence and Security Office, the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. In other words, this is the group that's replacing the task force, which Gillibrand alluded to and said by whatever name they chose. This is the name they chose. The AOIMSG will synchronize efforts across the department. By the way, underline. The reason they underline it is to make it clear how high up this is being directed by the high level. So it's not being trivialized. I want to make that clear. To assess and mitigate any associated threats to safety of flight and national security. You'll hear references to this all the time. They generally are relatively mundane. They're not too intense, but they constantly refer to security, and there's a reason for that. To provide oversight of the AOI-MSG, the Deputy Secretary also directed the United States Defense Intelligence and Security to lead an Airborne Object Identification and Management Executive Council. So they set up a group, and they've also set up a council to be comprised of DoD and intelligence community membership and to offer a venue for U.S. government interagency representation. This is oftentimes a working group. It can include up to 40 or 50 people, and it can spread completely across multiple agencies and even military services. That's how big this is. And then they go on, it's a very short release. Incursions by any airborne object into SUE, which is special use airspace, pose safety of flight and operation security concerns. That's pretty mundane, not too bad, and may pose national security challenges. Okay, that's fine. DoD takes reports of incursions by any airborne object identified or unidentified very seriously, and they have for the last 74 years, I can assure you, and investigates each one. The decision is the result of planning efforts and collaboration conducted by the Office of the U.S. Department of Intelligence and Security and other DoD elements at the direction of Deputy Secretary Hicks, and that is underlined. Why is it underlined? Again, to emphasize how high the level of management of this issue is within the Department of Defense. To address the challenges associated with assessing UAP occurring on or near DoD training ranges and installations highlighted in the DNI. Let's just say that sentence indirectly refers to something very important, and that is nuclear weapons tampering events in which unidentified aerial phenomena piloted by extraterrestrials have turned off our nuclear weapons repeatedly. And I can assure you the nuclear weapons witnesses will be centerpiece of the coming hearings. Now, all of this sounds fine, but here's the most important thing about this press release. Here's what the Department of Defense did. The 2022 National Defence Authorization Act with the language from Gillibrand in Gallego, particularly Gillibrand, said 90 days from the signing of the bill. The Department of Defense didn't wait 90 days. They went ahead and set it up immediately. Interesting. They could have waited. They could have waited another 4 months and then put this out, say, in March sometime. But no, they put it out immediately. Why? Because the Department of Defense has already made its decision about the path it's going to take. It's going to support this process. It's going to support the hearings, and it is going to support disclosure. And by doing this, it's showing goodwill. It's moving the process along. It's satisfying, obviously, the Senate Intel Committee, and it's satisfying you. This is great politics, and it's very smart. Not surprisingly, there are those that view this as an attempt to take the whole thing over. What can I say? They need to stay in Washington a little bit more, and they'd understand what's going on. All right, hang on a second. Let me bring this down. What else we got here? Okay, then we move on to another interview with John Kirby. Now, this is all the way November of 2021. Now, things are getting a little intense, and you can kind of see that he's struggling a little bit more, because the more that gets out there, the more difficult it is for Admiral Kirby to maneuver around the questions without getting into hot water or creating a problem for the process. Let's see what we got.
Okay. Thanks, John. I wanted to ask you about this new UAP office that was created by Deputy Secretary Hicks and announced last week. The Aerial Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. Was there any, it was a mouthful. Was there any coordination with lawmakers on Capitol Hill that are proposing related legislation, like Representative Gallego, Senator Gillibrand? And secondly, some former Pentagon officials who had worked on this issue, Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo, have said that this is an effort for the Pentagon to be less transparent on UAPs. And I was just wondering if you had any response.
On the first one, I can't speak to pending legislation. Obviously, I'd refer to those members, but we absolutely kept members of Congress informed as we fashioned this group together and announced it. And it is, to your second question, it is really designed to help us better coordinate the reporting processes, the actual reports themselves, and the analysis of those reports, so that rather than getting them sort of piecemeal and ad hoc, as we've been getting them from the services, this is a way to coordinate the input, so that we can there's a common set of parameters for how to report them and to analyze them, and then to assess what we've got. And not all reports are going to manifest themselves in something that we consider a national security threat. So this is a chance for us to be a much more organized in the way we process these reports. And as we will certainly continue to be as transparent as we can about these phenomena and the impact that they may or may not be having on our ability to operate.
Is there any specific commitment to release some data or information on these to the public at some point? Something beyond a briefing to Congress or closure?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a specific report to announce today that, on any kind of a frequent basis that we would do, but I can assure you that our intention is to be as transparent about this phenomena as we can. Again, Travis, understanding that there'll be national security considerations that we have to keep in mind, but we'll be as transparent as we can. But I don't want to leave you with the impression that there'll be sort of a regular drumbeat of some kind of report that gets posted on the website.
And then finally, I want to show you this very quickly. We're about to get to the media. We started late, we'll end late, about 16 minutes. The media has been covering all this intensely for the last 4 years. And on my website, this is the print media archive. As you can see, we're up to 978 articles for 2021. I anticipate that within a few days, that's going to hit 1,000. That'll be the first time 1,000 or more articles has been logged into my print media archive since 2016. This should not surprise anybody. But all the articles that relate to the Stars Academy's emergence and all of the subsequent relevant events that followed, dealing with the politicians, dealing with the DOD, have all been earmarked with this, right? With this red lead-in. And as you can see, there are a lot of these, all right? The total number of these articles going back 4 years is 1,200. Okay? But as you can see, this year, one after another is earmarked under that section, meaning TTSA, subsequent political DOD events, a very substantial number of these articles. And as we get, as you can see, as we get closer back up here to the present, they intensify even more. Overall, there's been over 1,200. On the report, there is a section in 2020 that is not earmarked in red, but it's another 200 articles that are earmarked in green. What are they about? These are articles specifically about I'm sorry, got that wrong. Let me back up. These are articles that are about specifically just the report. All right. So what I mean by that is you had that June 25 report, and these articles started appearing about that, and they are in green. And you can see very soon there are a lot of them, right? A couple of hundred articles about just the report on top of the ones in red. These could have been green, could have been red as well, but I wanted to identify them as specifically about that task force report. Okay, the coverage of this issue today is the greatest that it's ever been since Roswell, or ever for that matter. It is beyond intense. It is almost overwhelming. There are journalists dropping into this from all the major papers. In addition, there are high-end journalism is developing independent of the mainstream that is also jumping into this. The number of actual total articles being created is far beyond anything I could log in, but I tend to focus on the mainstream papers. Okay, now, let's go a little bit further into the media. What I'm going to do now is, what was the media doing? And I'm going to focus on the two major papers in the United States. And those papers are what is called the newspaper of record in the United States, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, the political paper of record. And we'll start back in April 9. They are not alone. UFO reports surge in the pandemic. May 13, even if you think discussing aliens is ridiculous, just hear me out, by very noted writer Ezra Klein. May 21, Harry Reid, What We Believe About UFOs. UAP hadn't quite crossed over yet, but it was almost there. Written by Harry Reid, former Senate Majority Leader. And then we have June 3rd. Why are we all talking about UFOs right now? And that was by Jennifer Jett. And then we have E.T. Phone Home by Maureen Dowd. That was on June 5. This is notable. Maureen Dowd has only written one other column about this issue. And it was in 1997, a few days after the notorious press conference held by Colonel Haynes at the Department of Defense, where they recounted again the mogul balloon farce, and then made the deep mistake of getting into crash test dummies, which were dropped in 52, is what people thought they saw in 1947 that were 4 feet and gray with big eyes. And she wrote a column, I think 2 days later, basically saying the whole thing was bullshit, which was kind of cool. But then she never wrote anything after that. But she just did this. Bless her heart. I'd like to see Maureen Dowd do more columns like this. Let's go on. What happens next? Julian Barnes, which is one of the chief national defense correspondents for the New York Times. The truth has not always been out there. And then on June 24, Gail Beckman, Emily Eakin, Prepare Yourself for Little Green Men. Then Julian Barnes again on June 25. Intelligence officials are set to release a declassified UFO report. And then they published it in the New York Times, the full classified report. And then Julian Barnes and Helene Cooper, another national defense and defense writer. U.S. finds no evidence of alien technology in flying objects, but can't rule it out either. Nicely played. And then the last one, November 24, again, Julian Barnes, one of the top correspondents of national security. Pentagon forms a group to examine unexplained aerial phenomena. What was the Washington Post doing during this period? Let's take a look. They published a lot more articles than the New York Times. In fact, the New York Times and the Washington Post have never published anywhere near the number of articles that have been published this year and any other year. Okay? Wait a minute. Let me get rid of that. Just a second. Bye-bye. Okay. Let's get it. Where is it? There we go. Okay. Let's start back. What did they have to do? March 23, 2021. Thanks to Trump-era COVID relief bill, a UFO report may soon be public and it'll be big, ex-official says. This is not correct. The bill was not thanks to the COVID bill. It was simply included in it as a convenience. Would have been passed either way, but that article was in March 23. And then we have April 1, Daniel Dresner. We need to talk about UFOs again. You think it's published on April 1? Got to be a joke? They even say it. This is not a joke column. And then we have lost that. I'll move on. On March 23, how UFO sightings went from joke to national security worry in Washington. Then on May 24, she's a fighter pilot who saw a UFO for real, Dietrich. Once again, I got to get out of that top area. It's really a problem in terms of using this approach. 1 second, take it over here. What do we got here? This is Dresner again, May 26, when disgraced theories are respectable again. This is important. What is he saying? What is this headline saying? They used to be disgraced, but I guess they're not. Well, guess what? Not only were they were disgraced, they were true. We have been trying to tell the truth on this for 74 years. And the reason it was disgraced is not because of our actions, because the government disgraced it in order to create an intellectual ghetto. Something I hope you folks will never, ever allow our government to do again. Let's see. What do you got? May 2021, we're asking the wrong questions about UFOs. Washington Post, June 1. Close encounters, Democrats and Republicans unified in taking UFO seriously. That is a very important point. This concept of Democrats and Republicans unifying about this issue is very significant. They know full well this is a unifying issue. It is not partisan. It allows them to actually do good politics and not make asses of themselves. That is one of the reasons it's moving forward. What do we got here? June 4, report does not confirm or rule out extraterrestrial activity and unexplained aerial events. Now, Washington Post, June 4, 2 articles, same day. Report does not, never mind, that's a duplicate. And then how government started taking UFOs seriously. That's on June the 4th. That's the 2 articles. I once made fun of UFOs. Now the US government is giving me second thoughts. That is by John Kelly on June 6, 2021. Let me comment on that. John Kelly, who I have contacted recently, is famous for writing the cookie column 10 years ago in the Washington Post. He was the only Washington reporter sent to cover the nuclear weapons tampering press conference produced by Robert Hastings and Robert Salas with another 3 or 4 military witnesses to nuclear tampering events. The room was packed with reporters. There weren't that many articles, though. It was 2010, but they got some press, and that's what they sought. But John Kelly wrote a humor piece. In other words, the only coverage of former SAC-based officers testifying at a press conference at the National Press Club about events when our nuclear weapons were turned off was a humor column by John Kelly. It is one of the most infamous articles or columns ever written in the Washington Post. And approximately 11 years later, he has finally acknowledged that, and I've offered to take him to lunch. We'll see if he takes me up on that. Now, Washington Post, June 8th, UFOs and National Security with Luis Elizondo, former director, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Lou's getting a lot of press lately and doing every podcast he can get. June 8th, transcript, UFOs and National Security with Luis Elizondo, former director, Advanced Aerospace. Is that a double? If it is, I apologize. And now we have June 25. U.S. unable to explain more than 140 unidentified flying objects, but new report finds no evidence of alien life. And then opinion, Molly Roberts, June 30. Aliens might be the thing to finally unite us. Remember that phrase, unite us. Not necessarily around the threat, but around their very presence. What do we got here? June 6, Daniel Dresner again, one of their top writers. Where are we on UFOs and national security? June 30, UFOs exist and might come from beyond Earth, the US said. Will that encourage conspiracy theorists? That's an interesting thing. Curtis Brown. We move on. August 5, UFO, a conversation with Mark Monroe and Greg Agian. These are very high-level people. That's a very high-level conversation. It's very good. And then we have this piece, August 31. UFO mania is out of control. Please stop, by Joel Achenbach. Of all of the articles written in the New York Times and the Washington Post this year, and believe me, there have been scores and scores of others going back, but this year, this is the only skeptical piece. One. And it's completely out there. Joel Achenbach is a smart guy. He views himself as a science journalist. He interviewed me way back in 1997. He just can't accept it. I think there are some people out there that were wrong on this issue and they can't bear to acknowledge that. And they're going to basically stick to their belief on this until the last dog dies. This is an article that will offend you. It's not a stupid article. He's a smart guy, but you will read this and go, where in the hell has this guy been for the last 20 years? And then on April 19th, we've got highly religious Americans are less likely to believe intelligent life exists on other planets. They're starting to survey the religious issue. It's not a big concern, but they're bringing it up. It's legitimate. And then another article along those lines, and then finally, Pentagon will track unexplained airborne objects through the new intelligence group. So you can see the Washington Post and the New York Times, the major papers in the United States, have now completely come on board and are engaging this issue within the parameters that have been set up by the To the Stars Academy people, particularly Elizondo and Mellon, and within the context of what they know is going on. I assure you, there are, and by the way, Jeff Bezos is a billionaire and he owns the paper outright, and his company has $100 million contracts with the CIA. If you believe me, Jeff Bezos knows there's an extraterrestrial presence, but there is a process underway and they're serving that process. I'm not necessarily unhappy with that. Okay, and now I'm going to close out with this. Am I going to close out with this? Let me think. I think I got, oh, no. There's one other one that's kind of important that I commend to you. I call your attention to a particular writer. His name is Marek von Rennenkampf. He is a young man. I think he's in his early 30s. And let me tell you who he is. This is short. He served as an analyst with the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of International Security and Non-Proliferation, as well as an Obama administration appointee at the U.S. Department of Defense. That is who Marek von Rennenkampf is. And I can assure you, he has plenty of inside connections. And what he has chosen to do is write a very strong series of articles. They're only in one place, and that's the Hill newspaper. The Hill media, which is the Hill newspaper and Roll Call. These are the papers that are read by everybody in Washington, D.C. that cares at all about making progress or keeping their jobs. The staffers who then report to the Congress people, lobbyists, corporate, you name it. They read the Hill. And it's part of a media company that is this largest independent political media company in the United States. Everybody reads this paper. And so you want to find, these articles are all on my print media archive, but starting back in, when was it? It's usually up the top. Yeah, May 17th. he writes this: strange bedfellows, UFOs are uniting Trump's fiercest critics and loyalists. And then on May 27, he says extraordinary explanations for UFOs look increasingly plausible. And then on June 15, he writes Biden should channel Reagan as ask Putin about UFOs at the summit. And then on July 8th, he writes UFOs are an intriguing science problem. Congress must act accordingly. Right? And then on August 9, he writes UFO stigma, alien conspiracy theories are relics of the Cold War paranoia. I got to drop down again. Hang on. Okay. Here we go. And then on November 1 of this year, he's picking up speed, by the way. NASA Chief Bill Nelson, latest official to suggest UFOs have otherworldly origin. Let me make an important point here. It is not an accident that the recently appointed director of NASA was not only a former senator, a former member of the Senate Intel Committee, you know, the one that Rubio chaired and Gillibrand belongs to, but a former astronaut. And he comes on board just in time to start putting out statements to the effect that NASA is going to be looking into the UFO issue. And there have been several more of these. In other words, he was brought on to bring NASA on board, and his background is appropriate. The people will be comfortable with it. In other words, the Pentagon is on board, NASA is on board, and other entities in the government are on board. Moving forward with von Rennenkamp. Then on 11/9, a few days later, Senator Gillibrand's historic legislation would revolutionize study of UFOs. And then a couple of days later, on 11/16, in dramatic shift, National Intelligence Director does not rule out extraterrestrial origins. And then 11/24, this Thanksgiving, skip the political food fights and talk UFOs instead. I want to take him to lunch too. I'm going to tell him, look, switch to UAP, dude. And finally, just a couple of days ago, December 1, ex-officials voiced deep concerns over Pentagon UFO unit. This is responding to some people like Elizondo. They were a little troubled that the Department of Defense acted so quickly. Von Rennenkamp is no outlier. He is an insider, young with a substantial career ahead of him. He is connected. And all of these articles, you might as well read them as if they are coming directly out of the Department of Defense, or even perhaps the CIA. This is how they're communicating. This is how they're opening it up. This is how they're moving forward. Okay, now, here's what I'm going to finish with. Essentially, this is about why it matters. And this may surprise you a little bit. You may be aware that there's a bit of a debate going on these days about global warming, okay, and climate change. It's really taking up a huge amount of press, time, huge amounts of money, and vast sums of money are being proposed to deal with the issue. I actually believe there is climate change and there is global warming. And later in this century, it's going to cause some serious problems. Now, admittedly, Kentucky being devastated by 30 tornadoes is a difficult problem for the Kentuckians. But from the standpoint of the globe, it's still decades down the line. And we can't solve it. I know you're thinking, yeah, we can. We can. Those of you that are somewhat progressive in your thinking, no, we can't. We don't have the technology. The money required will completely destroy economies. But there's one other reason. Because one of the many things that we simply won't deal with in this world, even though we've become a global civilization, is population. We simply aren't dealing with population. In fact, China just announced that they need more Chinese people. And so they're going to cut back on their restrictions on families so they can have more births. The population guarantees, the population growth that we're facing over the next 30 years, we have no chance to solve the global warming problem as we think now, okay? But it's worse than that. It's a moot point. The odds right now are we are not going to have to deal with global warming because we're going to be dead. Why? Because the number one problem facing the human race is not the internet or social media. It's not climate change. It is nuclear war, period. And the world made the decision a while back that there was nothing they could do about it. And so they're going to let that ride while they debate and scream and yell at each other about other things that ultimately are meaningless. Wow, think about that. Let me just give you just a glimpse, because this is a whole nother lecture, but just give you a little glimpse. Back in 2004, I found this article. It was in the San Francisco Gate. Air Force pursuing antimatter weapons. The program was touted publicly, then came official gag order. And boy, did it come. Virtually, you can't find any articles after that. You can find some fringe stuff, but essentially the media absolutely shut down on this. The US Air Force is quietly spending millions of dollars investigating ways to use radical power source, antimatter, the eerie matter of ordinary matter, in future weapons, the most powerful potential energy source presently thought to be available to humanity or pretty much anybody else. And then silence. Now, I don't know if any of you saw Angels and Demons, the movie made from Dan Brown's book, but it was about antimatter. And for those of you that didn't take much physics, it's really very simple. When we exploded the bomb on Hiroshima, the amount of matter that was converted to energy was less than the matter in a dime. In fact, it was a fraction of the matter in a single dime. It was grams. Antimatter, when it comes into contact with matter, completely converts to energy, meaning it's thousands, magnitudes more powerful than the standard nuclear weapon technology. If you had a bowling ball of regular matter and you connected it to a bowling ball of antimatter and you did it in New York, it would destroy all of New York, New England, a good deal of the South, and go inland probably 500 miles. It's the most dangerous thing you could research in the world, and the Air Force has been researching it well before 2004. God knows how many millions they've spent, and you don't know anything about it because that's one of those other things you don't have a need to know. Antimatter weapons is ball game. Let's hope that they're failing miserably. What they'll probably have is an accident. It will blow up a sizable portion of the state, and the people will say, that's enough. Let's shut that program down. But don't count on it. That was 2004. That was 17 years ago. Recently, China announced that they're testing and launching hypersonic nuke weapons. That was startling at first until they found out the total picture. What we finally learned is the Chinese launched a hypersonic missile that then launched another missile while traveling 3,000 miles an hour. And our government acknowledged that we don't have that technology. Hypersonic missiles like that could hit so fast, absolutely cannot be stopped. You'd barely have time to write a note to your spouse. And of course, this recent article, what can I say? Map reveals where World War III could break out. 2021, as experts warn, another big frontier of warfare. How about this one? Come on. Boop. Oh, come on. I hate this. Bingo. Space news. U.S. generals planning for a space war they see as all but inevitable. Wow. You know, you think that would maybe become an article or a big thing on CNN or something? No. Just mentioning that. Just inevitable space war. Don't worry about it. How about this? See what that is? That's really cool, actually. This is a actual animated map of all the satellites around the Earth right now. There are 7,000, of which 3,500 are active and 3,500 are dead. In addition to that, there's 30-some thousand pieces of debris that's at least 10 millimeters or larger. Or is it 10 centimeters, I think. And then there's a couple of 100 millions of very small pieces going down to a millimeter. All of them are traveling at least 17,000 miles an hour. Any one of them passes through you, you're going to have a bad day. We polluted space. There it is, right? I can even make it move. Check this out, right? I think I can make it move. Can I make it move? Yeah, I can make it move. There it goes. Now we're putting up even more satellites. Why is this important? Well, aside from the fact that space has been completely polluted and eventually people are going to start getting killed out there, is because, you see, we don't have the ability to know if a nuclear weapon is in orbit. Now, wait a minute, you're saying? We've heard that there are no nukes in space. Yeah, sure, you've heard that. But we can't tell. Why? Simple. Because the way that we are able to surveil rocket launches for our national security is by trajectory. And so when a missile is launched from North Korea or anywhere else, we know almost immediately the trajectory of that missile, and it's going to be suborbital. However, when any country launches a satellite into orbit, well, that is a trajectory to go into orbit. And so we don't suddenly raise DEFCON, raise the DEFCON level. It's a satellite. It's going into orbit. North Korea has put some satellites into orbit. And so if that satellite happens to contain a nuclear weapon, we don't know it. Do we have the ability to detect radiation from a nuclear weapon in orbit? No. What does that mean? It means that we could have nuclear weapons in orbit right now. Do we? No, don't know. How bad is that? It's unbelievably bad. Nuclear weapons in orbit means EMF events. And that means a weapon above a country of size goes off. It has an electromagnetic effect, which has the potential to virtually shut down the entire electricity systems within that country. Recently, one of our former CIA directors said that if such a weapon were exploded over the United States, a third of the population would be dead within 12 months. Have you heard anybody talking about this lately? Have you heard any politicians bringing it up at their campaign debates or campaign presentations? Have you seen any articles about it? Is it being covered by MSNBC, CNN, Fox? Is it being talked about by anybody? No. We've just pushed it aside. Can't do anything about it. Hey, nuclear war happens, it happens. Let's fight each other forever over global warming and drive each other crazy about when the water is going to seep up on the coast of Florida. But let's don't do anything about the nuclear weapons issue. Let's don't do anything about arms limitation. This is the most dangerous thing in the world. How dangerous? Just a couple of months ago, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, and you can go to the site, thebulletin.org, it's got a 2-hour video explaining why they just moved the clock to 100 seconds to midnight, the closest it's ever been, and they give all the reasons for that. We are almost certain to have a nuclear war within the next dozen years, give or take, unless significant developments take place, because what we're doing right now almost guarantees it's going to happen. It is a dereliction of responsibility by the collective human race without parallel. It's unbelievable. And so when the missiles fly and people are seeing them fly in the sky heading toward the next city, they'll probably forget about global warming and wonder if they can live another 48 hours. So this issue about this being the most important issue in the world today, the biggest threat, not ETs, not global warming, is important for another reason. It has a direct connection to the extraterrestrial presence. There is an extraordinary and profound link between our nuclear weapons, the threat they pose to us, the threat they pose to ETs, and the actions of extraterrestrials and the disclosure process. But that is for another lecture at another time.
Watch more podcast clips now on our YouTube channel. Go to Livewire Podcast Clips and watch more great podcast videos just like this one.